All right, guys, we're live. Welcome again to another episode of Divide Chat. I'm extremely excited about this episode, as are some of you and all of you on Twitter. I have two special guests, Laura Weidman Powers and Tristan Walker of Code 2040. So welcome, guys.
Thank
Thanks for
you.
having us.
They both admitted this is their first and second time in Google Hangout. So Google,
First
if you're
time.
watching, you need to step up your game because no one's doing this thing except me.
Bad business.
As always, the Divide Talk and the goal of the Divide Talk is to allow us to have conversations and discussions around topics that can allow us to have the end goal of closing the digital divide. If some of you are watching for the first time, my name is Navarrow, the creator of the Close the Divide project. So we're going to start this off and really talk to Laura and Tristan a little bit about their backgrounds, about the Code 2040 project, so that everyone gets an understanding about it, and then, as always, open it up for questions. So if you're watching, send your questions on Twitter using the hashtag DivideChat. The invite went out. If you want to join the online video panel, feel free, and we'll take questions and answers going in. So first, guys, again, welcome. I appreciate you guys taking the time in your evening to come talk about your project. First, we'll be gentlemen and let the lady go first. Laura, maybe introduce yourself, kind of tell people your background and a little your story about how you ended up being part of Code 2040.
Sure. So hi, everybody. My name is Laura Weidman Powers, and I'm the founding executive director of Code 2040. And my background, let's see. So I grew up on the East Coast, New York City. Went to Harvard for undergrad, majored in psychology, did not, unfortunately, major in engineering or CS, although now I retroactively wish that I had. And then after college, spent a few years working in education, youth development, nonprofit management, and technology. And then decided to go out to California for graduate school. I have a JD and an MBA from Stanford, and Stanford Business School is where Tristan and I met, sort of the very beginning of the entire story of how we ended up here. And while I was in grad school, I got kind of bitten anew by the entrepreneurship bug and really interested in technology and tech startups. And so I spent most of my time kind of summers and during the year, and then full-time after graduating, working with a consumer web startup that made kind of social interactive products on the web. Exploring a lot of issues around how people kind of share information and also privacy issues. And I did strategy and product development there, and that was the first time that I worked really closely with engineers and was really kind of impressed by everything that they could create that I couldn't. And so I was really kind of excited by that and also jealous of it. And then I came, that was in LA. I came back up to San Francisco, kind of where I had always been planning to head back up, and started having conversations with Tristan about this idea that he had. And I'll let Tristan talk about kind of the germ of the idea and how that turned into reality when he talks through his background.
Yeah. Hey, everyone. So Tristan, I'll take you way back. I was born and raised Queens, New York. Went to Stony Brook University for my undergrad, had a BA in economics, had no idea Silicon Valley existed, but I realized early on that I had one goal in life, and that was to get as wealthy as possible as quickly as possible. I realized that there are three ways to do it. The first way was to be an actor or an athlete, which didn't work out for me too well at all. The second way was to work on Wall Street, which I had the good fortune of doing. So I was an oil trader on Wall Street for 2 years or so, and absolutely hated it. I was a victim of bad culture and said I'd never want to have to go through this ever again. The day I came to that realization, I said, man, I figured out the athlete-actor thing. That didn't work out. The Wall Street thing didn't work out. So the only other opportunity was entrepreneurship. And the day I came to that realization is the day I applied to Stanford Business School. And the interesting thing about Stanford Business School, I didn't apply because of Silicon Valley or any of that stuff. I only applied there because I wanted to get as far away from Wall Street, literally and figuratively, as possible. And I felt that there was no way you can get further than Pacific Ocean and Wall Street. So it was the only place I applied. Unfortunately, got in. And once I got in, I realized Silicon Valley existed. I think I was 23 at the time. And then I was saying, wow, like there are the 23-year-olds my age making millions of dollars. How did I have no idea that this place existed? And not only were they making millions of dollars, they were actually genuinely excited about like fundamentally changing the world. And like immediately, I said I have to figure this thing out. So during my first year in business school, it was 2009, that second semester, I got an internship at Twitter. So I joined that company when there were probably 20 people at the company. Now there are well over 1,000. I worked there for about 7 months or so as an intern on the business side. And then in between my first and second year of business school, I was in LA, and I heard about this thing called Foursquare. It was a startup about 2-3 months old. And I said, wow, like I understand everything about this company and I want to be a part of it. So I hustled my way in to that startup, and we could talk about that too. But I was the first, really second employee at the company. And from there, I led a lot of business development and strategic partnerships for the company. I was there for about 3 years and just left in June of this past year to join Andreessen Horowitz venture capital firm as an entrepreneur in residence. And now I'm hoping to start my own company in the tech space. The Code 2040 thing is really interesting. The story behind it was pretty much a reflection of my story. I said, wow, like I had no idea Silicon Valley existed. All I thought Silicon Valley was a place where semiconductors got made that got better over time. That's all I knew about Silicon Valley, and that's a shame, right? It's a fundamental shame. And I said, wow, like what is the reasons why like this issue is even an issue? And it really nailed down to two things. The first is awareness, right? So, there was a reason why I wanted to be an actor or an athlete, because I saw folks like Michael Jordan, Magic Johnson, et cetera. Right? There's a reason why I wanted to work on Wall Street, because there are folks like Stan O'Neill and Carl Harris who are just killing it. But when you think about Silicon Valley, I can't really point to anybody, at least as we call it, like beacons of light, that I'm inspired by to potentially want to become. So, the one problem that we like to talk about is like this awareness problem. A lot of people talk about there being a pipeline issue, which there is, right? Like there are not enough people taking STEM, science, technology, engineering, and math. But I think the bigger problem is that there's an awareness problem. And I think if we fix that, if we kind of inspire enough people to be beacons of light, you're going to inspire a whole generation of people to want to take STEM. And I think that's what we're trying to attack. And the second thing is access. So, it's one thing to attend a hackathon, right? It's another thing to be invited to a San Francisco Giants baseball suite with the major angel investor and hobnob with kind of tech luminaries. And I wanted to build a program that would allow folks like me, at least earlier on in their careers, to get the awareness they need and the access they need to be incredibly successful out here. And that was the start. So I decided that I wanted to do this or pursue it in December. Laura and I had a chat in December, and fortunately for me, she said that this is a space that she was fairly excited about, and I told Laura that there are a few people I trust to actually make this happen. And fortunately, we got her, and it's been a success ever since.
Well, great. Thank you guys for kind of giving the background. I think both of you, coming from different backgrounds yourselves and having experience in the Valley, in thinking about starting to get to the point of talking about why Code 2040 exists, maybe you guys can talk a little bit about your own experiences in being minorities in the Valley and what that was for you, because I think that's a good indicator of where the gaps are. So maybe each of you can kind of talk about what you saw, what was, how you thought it would be, what was a total surprise, given, we all know that there aren't as many minorities as we would like in the space. Talk about some of your first-person experiences. Laura, I'll throw it to you.
I think, Tristan, do you want to start this off? Because I think that's pretty core to...
Yeah, no, I'd be happy to. I mean, my experience has been great. I've been fortunate to work with two really great companies. Right? Like, I've been incredibly blessed and fortunate, and I've kind of milked it as much as I can. And the one thing that really inspires me about Silicon Valley in general, which I think is unique to this area relative to the rest of the country is that here no one underestimates anyone else, right? Like it's a subtle but very, very important point that folks need to understand. And that very fact made me want to like have a career here, right? You know, when you're in an environment where no one really underestimates anyone else, like that's important, right? So you could walk down Palo Alto, University Avenue, and there could be a guy with ripped jeans and a dirty T-shirt and worth $1 billion, right? But no one underestimates that guy. So taking that as given, I said, all right, like if no one underestimates anyone else, how do I put myself in a position where no one can underestimate me? So it was important for me to, you know, tackle the opportunities that I actually wanted, as opposed to settling. And you know, I knew exactly what I wanted from Twitter and Foursquare and Andreessen Horowitz, among other things, and I had the good fortune to actually get it. So indeed, like there aren't very many minorities pursuing kind of engineering in Silicon Valley. But again, like I fundamentally believe that it's an awareness problem. If we fix the awareness problem and folks understand that this is a place where no one underestimates anyone else, I think we'll get a hell of a lot more people here.
Great. Laura?
Yeah, I think that, you know, it pretty much sums up my experience as well. I think, you know, speaking to different people around the Valley and, you know, students when I was out on the road this fall, it really comes across that there's a sense of, you know, particular for students who have not been out here or don't know anyone who's been to Silicon Valley, of not quite grasping kind of what is it like. You know, Silicon Valley is a really unique place. It's kind of unlike anywhere that I've ever been or worked before, in kind of exactly the ways that Tristan's describing. And I think, you know, if you don't know someone who's kind of been out here, been working in the space, it can be really hard to wrap your head around if you haven't been out here, if you hadn't had those experiences. And I think for a lot of the students that we work with, you know, this is their first foray into what it means to be in the world of tech entrepreneurship in a place like Silicon Valley. And they just haven't, you know, been aware of what the opportunities out here have been. They don't know anyone that's been taking advantage of them. And so that's kind of exactly the issue that we're trying to tackle.
So what would you guys say? You know, I remember from, you know, I agree with both of you. I remember from my personal experience, you know, running Global Grind, the first time I got to go to Facebook, right? And just walking in the lobby, there was just such an energy. And the point you made, Tristan, about no one underestimating you. Like you just felt that everyone in that room kind of walked in with, I deserve to be here and I'm going to make some change happen. Like there was no levels there. It was just pure open energy. And I think back to that moment because I just left that room wanting to build something, right? Like I didn't know what I was going to build. I was already running a startup, but you just walked out of that room. And for me, similar to what you guys said, it was that if people knew what this feeling felt like Silicon Valley will be overrun with people from across the country because it's the only time you can feel that feeling. You know, and I think one of the misconceptions that a lot of people have is that, you know, if you don't have a certain level of access, that, you know, you can't be successful here. So maybe, Tristan, maybe tell people about specifically your Foursquare story, because I think it speaks to, you know, to your point about having focus and being specific about what you're wanting and going about it in a unique way that you probably only could do with a Silicon Valley startup.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of people hear about the Foursquare story. I'll actually give both. Like, I have the Twitter story and the Foursquare story. So I came to Silicon Valley. I didn't know anybody here. Like, that's a fact. But I felt, I was like, yeah, like Twitter it's going to be something. I have to kind of be a part of this. And fundamentally it was changing my life. And I said, the energy is palpable. I need it. So I was like, man, like I don't know anyone here. How do I get this done? So I was at Stanford. I said, who are all the people who are 1 degree separated from this company that I need to talk to get it in here? And I exhausted every single person within my personal network and my friends' networks, et cetera. I spoke with 25 different people. The last person I spoke to, his name is David Hornick. He's a partner over at August Capital. He's also a professor at Stanford Law and Harvard Law as well. And I sat in on his office, and he said, Tristan, are you willing to work for free? I said, yes. He said, do you have ideas for the company? I said, yes. I told him what those ideas were. And like, that was the 25th person. And 2 days later, I got an email from Twitter telling me to come in and, talk to them about the ideas that I had, and the rest is history there. As it relates to Foursquare, I read about that company. I think we had 5,000 users at the time. But I got it. I said, like, this is fundamentally changing my life. I enjoy it. Energy is palpable. I need to be a part of it. So I reached out to the co-founders, Dennis and Naveen, emailed them once, no reply, twice, no reply, 3, 4 times, 5 times, no reply. Sent them 8 emails, nothing. But finally, on that 8th email, Dennis replied back, and he said, Tristan, he said verbatim, Tristan, I just may take you up on some of this. Are you ever in New York? Right? And I mentioned earlier I was in LA at the time. I got back home, and speaking to my wife, I was like, God, these guys actually finally replied back. What do I say? And like 5 minutes later, I replied back and said, you know what? I was actually planning on being in New York tomorrow. Should we meet up? And I booked my flight that night, flew out the following morning, hung out with them for a week, and a month later, I was running business development for the company. Right? Now, all this happened with zero context in Silicon Valley, but it was just pure hustle and pure, that's really all it was, pure hustle. But I was passionate about it. I knew that's what I wanted to do, and I'm not very risk averse. Like, when I know that there's something that I want, like, I go after it. And I tell a lot of folks, I have never not received the job that I've wanted to receive, if that makes sense, all the way from university. And that's a mere function of my just wanting one thing and wanting one thing only, and not being distracted by anything else. And I've been very fortunate to have those opportunities come on me.
So, in hearing us talking, people could look at this and easily say, it's nirvana in Silicon Valley, right? We all talk about the energy. We talk about people giving you opportunities, taking unique chances. So what's missing? If you had to say what's missing to make the Valley better, to make, to take it up a notch, what are those things that are missing right now? I'll throw that out to either one of you.
Are we talking about, like, to get kind of more folks that look like us out here, or just?
Yeah. So all this audience is hearing this and saying, hey, this sounds fantastic. Then why aren't there Tristan Walkers or Laura Weidman Powers at every startup in abundance?
Yeah. So I think that there are 2 responses that I have to that question. The first is actually more macroeconomic. And so I read a book. It's called Race Against the Machine, one of the best books I've read in the past year. And what it talks about is really the gap between rich and the poor, and why it's actually the case that it's going to get wider and wider. And his argument is the rich are richer because of productivity gains that have just continued to increase over the past 20, 30 years, and there really is no middle class. And they're able to take advantage of new technology to drive more productivity gains, while the people at the bottom don't have access to that stuff, right? And the rich are going to continue to get richer, and the poor are going to continue to be poorer if they don't take advantage of this new technology. And that had a profound effect on me that said, like, Silicon Valley is going to be everything for the next 50 years. So that's one fact. The second fact is, year 2040, folks of color are actually the majority of this country, right? In a world where we don't adopt the technology to drive those productivity gains, like, we're in bad shape. And that's not a future that I'd like my kids to be in, right? So that's the macroeconomic picture. So a lot of it is just numbers, right? Like, we will be the majority of the country. Like, folks will be more aware. More folks have access to this technology. You think about the pervasiveness of smartphones, broadband penetration, among other things. A lot of this is just naturally happening. And technology is becoming something that we can touch. 15 years ago, it was Symantec, Cisco, stuff that nobody knew about, right?
Right.
Today, it's Facebook, Twitter, Foursquare, Groupon, that sort of thing. So it's very consumer, and that's something that I'm incredibly excited about. Now, why aren't there other, for lack of a better example, like Tristan Walkers in the world? That's exactly what we're trying to fix, right? The problem is a lot of startups will fundamentally say, we get all the smart people anyway, right? Like, our recruiters get them all. And it was fascinating. Within our class, we had one kid who was a 4.7 out of 5.0 GPA, computer science grad, varsity athlete, co-president, like, and They didn't find them, right? So there's that problem, right? Just not being aware of people that are really, really talented at the top schools, but also for folks who go to places like Stony Brook, right, where these startups don't recruit at all. And the way we try and think about our not-for-profit is if it were a for-profit, right? What's the gap or need that we need to fill on both sides, right? There's the startups who don't have the resources to recruit, and we'll be the folks who will find the highest quality talent for them. And then Laura's been doing a fantastic job with that. So, I mean, overall, it's just, the numbers will dictate a change, I think. But as long as we're the catalyst getting the highest performing people and inspiring them to actually be the beacons of light to inspire a new generation of people, I think we'll be fine.
So, and I think when you think about that issue of perception and knowledge about the opportunity, you're right. I think there's people out here who could fill the slot at any startup right now that either don't know about the opportunity or aren't put in front of it in a way to make them, available to those startups. And I think, startups do say that. They say, look, we're attractive. People are beating down our door, so why should we go look in another nook and cranny to find it? But I think, the election showed us that the demographics of America are changing, right? And you're right. The economists say 2040. Actually, the way it's looking, it may even happen faster than that in terms of real impact. But what does that mean if that does happen and a lion's share of us aren't in the jobs that drive innovation? They aren't in the jobs that drive true change. We could really see the USA losing in a lot of these battles in terms of delivering the next generation of products and services. So with that, why 2040? What is 2040? What should the world know? The mission of 2040, and let's talk a little bit about that in particular.
Can I actually add one thing, and I'll let Laura kind of take the answer to that question.
Sure,
but
sure.
There's one thing that's really important for me, and the reason why I think this is probably one of the greatest even economic opportunities is if you go outside of the country, you're amazed by how much international culture is affected by American culture, right? Within this country, you're amazed by how much American culture is affected by Black and Latino culture, right? From food to music to dance, etc. Now, what does the world look like when we can actually affect the technology products in the way that we see fit, right? And that's, if you think about it, if this were the year 2040, would the majority of technology products be as successful as they are today? And I'd posit maybe or maybe not, right? And it's important to get the folks that will look like America 20, 30 years from now to actually be building products for America. And that's an inspiring thing for me, and something that, at least even when I look at my own thing, that I think a lot about.
Yeah, I think that we say a lot that the Code 2040 Fellows Program isn't about a summer internship. It's designed to be a career launching program that really kind of helps give wings to the leaders that Tristan is talking about. One of our fellows, I think, said it best when we were talking about this exact issue. We were being interviewed by Robert Scoble when we were at TechCrunch Disrupt, and she said, "Diversity isn't the problem. Diversity is the opportunity." And it's for this very reason that Tristan is laying out, because this is the changing face of America, and that means the consumer base, and it means the workforce, and it means that as we, there's a lot of talk these days about the talent crunch, and there aren't enough engineers, and so this is really the opportunity. This is a portion of the population that has been underengaged in STEM and engineering, and that is only growing. So we have the resources kind of under our nose, and it's a matter of actually using them. So when we look at Code 2040 and the reason why we've kind of chosen the summer fellowship program as the first program of the organization, you basically have a scenario, and Tristan brought up this idea of the pipeline problem, which is how diversity is usually talked about, particularly in STEM. And there's truth to that. There aren't enough students engaging in STEM early on in their education, and that means there are not enough students entering the pipeline. But even if you look at kind of down the pipeline, you have the percent of the population that's Black and Latino, which is about 30% right now. You have the percent of CS degrees that are going to Black and Latino students, which is about 18%. You have the percent of individuals in Silicon Valley, technical employees that are Black and Latino, which is less than 7%. And then you have the percent of leaders in that space, which is about 5%. And if you actually go all the way down and look at startups that are being funded by, the number is actually up for Black founders, is about 1% in this space. So there's essentially this kind of pretty stark nosedive. And so when we look at it, we say, you know, getting more students in the pipeline is important, but first kind of pulling out of that nosedive towards the end and making sure that the students that are going through the pipeline are succeeding. They have real opportunities, and we're seeing them succeed on a meaningful level, kind of numbers-wise, is important. If we're going to push students into the pipeline, we want to be able to say, you know, if you pursue STEM, there's many avenues for success for you. And so what we're looking at is, you know, taking students that are incredibly bright, incredibly technically talented, who are kind of about to embark on their career, and looking at what we can do to ensure that they have what they need to be wildly successful in their careers, so that they can then not only kind of bump up those numbers, but also turn around and be mentors, and kind of, you know, show the way and bring others along on that path, so that as, you know, the programs that are out there doing great work on further up the pipeline, as they continue to do that great work, that kind of sticks as students mature and enter their careers.
Yeah, and I think it's also important to, you know, a lot of times people conflate like high performing and high potential, right? And we focus on the highest performing with great potential students that we can find, right? And we want the kids that will excel to be the inspiration for more people. Like, I want all of these kids to be on the covers of the magazines, you know, wildly successful, wildly wealthy, but inspire them to make sure that they're in positions to give back to this next generation of people that want to do it. So it's a little bit of a spin, because we are focusing on, you know, the absolute highest performing folks, but it's working.
So Tristan, I remember, wow, I think it might be, it's actually about a year ago, when I was in the Valley for a CNN screening, and we were, you know, sitting together for drinks, and you were telling me you had this idea, and I think it was interesting because at the time, everyone was watching the CNN special, and they saw the New Me program, and they saw these minority entrepreneurs come and, you know, some be successful and some not be successful. And I remember personally thinking to the point that, you know, it was great that they were there, but the challenge in that process is that there's very few minorities who are prepared in the right way to come and take advantage of that opportunity, which is almost worse than not knowing about it at all. So, you know, I think we both were germinating ideas at the same time. You were like, hey, I'm going to focus on Code 2040, and I was like, I'm going to go all the way back to the beginning and get people to know about technology in the first place. So maybe talk a little bit about what kind of professional development you guys are giving the Code 2040 fellows. Actually, it was a question that came from Twitter. What kind of professional development you guys giving them? You know, you said they're already top performers. What training, what exposure are you guys giving them to prepare them to be involved in this ecosystem?
Laura, you want to run with that?
Yeah, sure. So we have kind of a few different buckets of what we do over the summer, and, you know, the basic structure of the summer is the student has an internship, a full-time internship with a top startup, technical internship, and then about 3 nights a week we gather all the Code 2040 fellows together and we have our own curriculum. The first type of thing that we do is around this idea of exposure and really kind of understanding kind of what's out there and what it means to be in this space and to be an entrepreneur. So we do visits to companies. We went to Google, Facebook, Twitter, Square this past summer, and we also have speakers come to us. So we'll do You know, the head of product at Twitter talked about product development. We had a few different CEOs and founders talk about kind of their process, and it kind of demystifies the kind of Silicon Valley experience and entrepreneurship. The second kind of thing that we do is more about actual training. And so we do workshops of various kinds. So one workshop that we did this past summer was we went to Bloomberg and did a media training workshop so that our students could learn about how to present themselves, whether it's kind of in an interview, which you know, many of the students had the opportunity to actually be interviewed over the summer and after, or whether it's, you know, you're at a networking event and you know, somebody asks you, what do you do, or, you know, where do you work? How do you answer that question? How do you tell your story effectively? We also did a user-centered design workshop at Stanford's design school. And then the students also get an executive coach. And what this means is basically they have someone who is there to simply help them think through their career. And that could be anything from kind of questions or issues that come up with their summer internship to here's my goal in 10 years, how do I get from here to there? And to kind of be thoughtful and deliberate about it. And the final piece of it is kind of mentorship and networking. Each of the fellows get 2 different mentors who work in the space that they're interested in, who can answer their questions and kind of give them kind of off-the-record insight. And then we do broader networking events where, you know, everyone gets to know other people, both of their own kind of age cohort. So we did events with, you know, Facebook's interns, with the Kleiner Perkins Fellows Programs interns, and then also, you know, down the line, people who, you know, hold the jobs that they may one day hold or be interested in holding and like that. So it's really a really packed, intense summer, but it kind of rounds out the experience so that not only do you kind of get your feet wet in terms of what it means to work at a startup in an entrepreneurial environment, but you get all of this extra exposure. So, you know, basically it's like, you know, concentrating on one internship while getting exposed to a whole host of different companies and products and industries out here in the Valley.
Yeah, I think it's really important. An important kind of piece of this for me is to make sure that all of our kids by the end of the summer are exhausted. And I think we will have succeeded if that's the case. And that certainly was the case for this past summer, but each of our fellows found it to be incredibly rewarding, right? It's really only 10 weeks, so we're going to pack those 10 weeks and make you tired. But you will, you know, feel rewarded at the end of it.
Yep.
So maybe you guys can talk about what were some of the biggest, I guess, surprises that you guys saw through the first class, and that could be surprises on the fellow side, like some of the things, something that someone came to you and said, I would have never thought X had I not been in this program, or something you guys said as you were going through it, I would have never seen that that would have occurred. You wouldn't even have thought that was going to happen when you went to that first inaugural class.
I mean, the biggest thing for me is I honestly did not anticipate the level of support that we got from a wide variety of stakeholders in the Valley and beyond. I mean, I just was blown away by the positive response and how excited people were about the program. You know, people of all races and genders. They really were excited about participating and supporting Code 2040. And that for me it was so gratifying, but it was really, I think, you know, in a lot of ways, people were looking for a way to channel this desire they had to support this cause. And I think, you know, we made it easy for a lot of people because of how the program is structured. You know, you could mentor, you could be a speaker, you could host a fellow. There was something tangible that people could do, and they were just thrilled to do it, and that was really gratifying.
Yeah, for me, I think the thing that I was most surprised about is that we were actually able to find such high quality students who hadn't been given the chance yet. Like, we started in February 1st we started. And I can't tell you how many times people said there's no way that you're going to get enough fellows to fill your class. Recruiting season's over, it's done. We got really, like, I mean, I gave you the profile of one of them, but that was pretty much across the board the talent that we got. It baffles me that those kids were not found previously, right? Like that, and that's upsetting to me. And the fact that it gave me belief that there are a hell of a lot more kids like that, and we're not going to let that happen. Even when I see kind of our first round applications come in, I'm like floored by how just like people will hire them tomorrow. The quality and caliber of students out there. And now to finally have that outlet, it's incredibly rewarding. But I was really surprised that even folks of that high caliber hadn't been scooped up already.
So one of the questions that came up was, Laura, you talked about the open response, the reception that you guys received. I mean, was there any pushback from anybody? Was there anyone who was kind of naysaying when you kind of walked in with this new idea of bringing people that had never heard of before into their companies? Any of that?
Well, no, I think that, you know, the kind of closest to that was, you know, we talk to startups and they are like, we want the best. And so, you know, the thing that is, I think, really great about Code 2040 is that I can say we have the best. No big deal. You know, I think people, you know, I was on the phone with a startup yesterday, and the woman I was talking to was their head of recruiting, and I kind of talked through the program and how it would work for her to host a fellow. And at the end, she said, well, how do you make money? Who pays you? And I was like, oh, we're a nonprofit. But for her, it's like the value we were providing was so clear that it was not, she wasn't looking at us as a charity. This was us providing a service that was clearly needed on both sides of the table. And so, you know, I think when we're talking about it right, when people understand what we're doing, you know, we don't get that pushback.
Have you just to talk to people who are in the audience who may be naysayers, because, you know, I'm sure some people believe that the startups are taking it as charity work and these kids aren't doing real work. Maybe tell them some of the real work that these guys and gals are doing in your program.
Yeah, it's all real work. It's actually we have a written requirement for the companies that we work with that our students must be placed on mission critical projects where they push code over the summer. And that was the case across the board. We had students, you know, literally making changes. We had one student who open sourced a project for her company. We had other students working. One student was the lead on their iOS app development. Another taught himself to code for Android over the summer and was on the Android team. I mean, they're definitely doing real work.
So,
yeah,
go ahead, Tristan, sorry.
Yeah, so, I mean, to the naysayer point, one thing that's really pissed me off, because I'm like so passionate about this thing, is when folks consider our program to be elitist. Like, nothing pisses me off more in the world when people say that. And one thing that we like to make clear is that there's a big difference between elite and elitist. So it's been, when I made that point about like high performing versus high potential, there are a lot of folks that say, but you're shutting out the high potential people. But, you know, there are a lot of high potential people who just mess stuff up all the time, right? And we wanted to make sure if we have this one chance to do something right, we're going to make it right. So that's, I mean, that's probably been the most like said, quote unquote, point against our program, which is kind of silly.
Yeah, you know, I'll give you that. I agree with you because I believe, um, anytime you start something new that's groundbreaking, you have to put your best foot forward. You would actually be doing your program a disservice if you put people in those roles that couldn't succeed because you'd close out future classes and the program would die on its end. The other thing is, I have a term that I believe works against us, which I call statistical racism, that the stats basically create a racist wall. And what I mean by that is, right now we don't have a track record of minorities high performing in the Valley. So when you go to a Y Combinator or a Techstars, the data is actually our biggest barrier because they're like, hey, if I look at the data, there's nobody coming to the table with those ideas. So when you look at all the programs, I kind of believe that we all are kind of creating the perfect ecosystem, right? If I'm places getting young people and underserved audiences that look at computers who've never looked at it, right? That light bulb moment goes off, they create interest. Then they go and they explore it and they become top performers. And then Code 2040 grabs those top performers and says, hey, you can go work at this startup. They work at the startup, they understand the inner workings of that startup. They say, hey, I can do this. Then they come out and they go into a new me. They go into any of these incubators and they build companies. But without those building blocks, you're not going to do it. So I think anyone who says, hey, they're grabbing the best, they're the best that weren't getting these opportunities. So why shouldn't they have an opportunity to do that in the first place? I think, you're absolutely right in terms of how people need to look at this, that there are top performers from underserved audiences who just weren't in play, and now they're starting to be in play. That's one piece of the puzzle. And I think there's other pieces. So I think you're exactly right in that. Maybe talk a little bit about the mentors, the people who were involved with the class, the effect they had on the students, the effect the students had on them as well.
Sure. I just wanted to say one other thing to the point that you were just making, because I think it's important, which is that there's this kind of trend that works extremely well in Silicon Valley around pattern matching in terms of how people hire, make investments, and you look around and it obviously works. It's an important piece of the puzzle, and so what we're trying to do is introduce a new pattern. And so kind of exactly along the lines of what you're saying, if we can have a group of students, of people that others can point to and say, yeah, I know people that are awesome from this group, then it kind of we describe it as basically short-circuiting the path to actually getting the network and getting the opportunities. So I think that's incredibly important.
So just to the outside world, in a few minutes we're going to open it up for Q&A. So if you have questions, send them to me on Twitter with the hashtag #DivideTalk, or join the online panel. We have a couple people coming in and out. So what's next for Code 2040?
Oh, it's tricky to answer because there's so many directions that we can go in, and it's kind of exactly what we're figuring out. We ran a pilot version of the program this past summer. So as you mentioned, we launched in February. We ran a pilot this past summer, 5 students, and we got such a great response and had so much interest from additional startups and students at the end of the summer that we're growing the program to about 20 to 25 students this coming summer. So it's 4 to 5x growth, which we're really excited about. And then the question is kind of what next? And we're exploring a bunch of different things. It would be too soon for me to actually say anything because then I don't want Tristan to hold me to it. But you can tell, I think, if we talk a lot about this particular Summer Fellows program, but I think if you take a step back and kind of look at the themes of the conversation that we're having and kind of the vision that Tristan outlined, we plan to make a massive impact, and it's going to go beyond one particular group of students in one city in one summer. And so what we're figuring out now is how do we get from A to B or A to Z, and kind of what is the right next step based on what we've learned already, because really the learnings from going through the process of running the program and the and the recruitment cycle are incredible. And so there's a lot of kind of information and data and experiences that we've had that we can translate into something much, much larger. And the question is just what?
Yeah, and if there's anything that folks can kind of leave this conversation with, is that we do not operate this as if we're a not-for-profit, right? Like we operate as if we were for-profit, and we want to win, right? And we want to build something that's sustainable, revenue generating, and how do we allow that revenue to allow us to expand and build something really, really important. And we have the 2040 in our name. Like this is for me personally, like a 30-year plan, right? And I believe very much in making sure that we last that long. Hopefully we don't last that long, so that like we build something that we really wouldn't need anymore, if that makes sense.
We want to be so effective that we go out of business.
Yeah, like that. This is important, and like we want to win, and I think we will.
Great, great. So I'm going to open it up for questions. I'm going to go to M. Cole Jones here in the panel here. Let me make sure you're open there. M. Cole Jones, you there? Turn your mic on, maybe. All right, you having tech?
All right, can you hear me?
Now we can. There you go. You just faded back out.
Okay, great. So glad I was able to join. What about now?
We got you. You're like a delay.
Okay, great deal. I'm so glad I was able
to. A Bruce Lee movie right now. You're a delay. Everything you say.
All right. Well, I'll keep going. Hopefully, the message will go through. But I just have one question. I'm based in Atlanta, and it's so interesting. We had a Black Founders event yesterday, well-attended event, and there was a young lady there who traveled out to Silicon Valley. She had a lot of great opportunities for her company, but they wanted her to go to Silicon Valley. But she's adamant and die-hard about staying in Atlanta for opportunities. So will there be any future opportunities for a Code 2040 for other cities such as Atlanta that are growing at a fast rate for minority entrepreneurs in technology?
The way I look at it is I think, there's a lot of amazing stuff in this space going on in other cities, and it's awesome, and, I think is what needs to happen. That said, what we do is a 10-week summer program, and I think to a degree, I think Silicon Valley is, that old phrase, if you can make it there, you can make it anywhere, which, used to be about New York. It's where I'm from, so I love it. But I think that really applies in the tech space in Silicon Valley. And so for us to take students and give them this truly immersive, high-intensity experience, which is it's designed to be a summer experience. I think it's important for us to do that in places where they can get that kind of whirlwind. Everybody here is thinking about this and doing this and is the best experience. And so to the degree that we can provide that in different cities, there's absolutely the possibility of us kind of creating separate summer programs. But it's really that's the motivation for housing it in Silicon Valley, with the hope that people will kind of do amazing things in technology, Silicon Valley and elsewhere.
Yeah, and we really need to win Silicon Valley, right? If we can get these kids performing well in Silicon Valley, we can just rinse and repeat everywhere. And until we do that, it'll be harder for us to kind of expand, and we want to do one thing uniquely well before we go super broad.
Yeah, Google. I was at Google a couple of times, and they have this whole idea about starting something well and then seeing if it can scale. So I actually think it would be a negative if all of a sudden you try to do Code 2040 across the country, because there's unique things in different geographic areas that would be different challenges. All right, so next question. What are the challenges to scale this thing? Funding, student talent, startups to place them in. What are some of you guys' challenges as you try to scale Code 2040?
So I think that, at least so far, obviously we're very young as an organization, but the demand has been boundless, both from the startup side and the student side. We certainly haven't hit a wall. We don't see the wall in that sense. I think kind of back to what I was alluding to before, I think the challenges that we're going to see around scaling are, assuming that we continue to knock it out of the park with our flagship program, where to go next. There's so many opportunities in this space, and I think there's so many opportunities that can be tackled in the way that we've tackled this one with, as Tristan said, a real business mindset around kind of executing at a high level and generating revenue and winning. I think there's a lot of different opportunities like that, and for us the challenge is going to be kind of which challenges to take up and in which order.
And it's also important to define scale, right? Is scale taking in 1,000 interns our summer, or is scale ensuring that our 50 high-performing folks reach 1,000 folks, right? I think there are ways that we can engineer that. To the fundraising side, we'll take money and happy to. But it's also important for us to kind of raise enough to get us to a stage where we wouldn't have to raise any more money. And what we're providing really, as Laura said, is a service, and it's a service that's worth something. And to the extent that we kind of nail it, particularly here in the Silicon Valley, and show people that it's worth something, so much so that they're willing to fund it as revenue to us, that'll allow us to scale without end.
Great. So the next question is, how does the media affect and play a role in helping to create visibility for minorities in technology?
I mean, for me, I have to reflect back on my story because that's really all I know. I mean, the only reason why I wanted to be an actor, an athlete, or work on Wall Street was for that very reason, right? And I think to the extent that the media understands that macroeconomic shift and talks about it in ways that inspire kind of constructive conversation, then we'll have something there. So media plays a huge role, right? It played a huge role in my own development, and to my detriment almost, because had they told me more about what Silicon Valley had to offer, I wouldn't have gotten my economics degree. I would have pursued something differently, or went to a different university or something of the sort. So media definitely has its role to play. And fortunately, throughout our program, we were very, very quiet in the beginning about what we were doing until the end, just to prove that we can do what we said we were going to do. And then you have folks like Bloomberg and Emily Cheng there, who've been incredibly supportive and helpful for us there, and kind of telling our story in the way that it should be told. And I think to the extent that you have reporters like her telling the story in the way that it should be told, as opposed to something that their viewers think would kind of inspire a conversation, that's when we'll have something pretty special. But everyone has a role to play there.
So another question from Christopher Walker on Twitter. What are your plans to highlight some of the participants and companies in your program to inspire other minorities to go down the path of STEM?
I mean, it's kind of related. The media is part of that. We've been really fortunate. We've had some great stories. Bloomberg, as we've mentioned, TechCrunch, Forbes, Wired. Each of the fellows has written a blog post about their summer experience, which is on Startup America's blog. So you can check that out. If you actually go to our website, code2040.org, there's a press page which you can kind of read about a lot of what we've been doing, including what the fellows have been up to. And if you follow us on Twitter, which is at code2040, or like us on Facebook, you'll see all of the stories that we put out as well. It's a big part of what we want to do is kind of promote the awesome work that our fellows are doing. And we have, taken a bunch of tacks. They've all been interviewed by reporters. We actually sent one of our fellows to the White House at the end of the summer. The White House did a roundtable on diversity and technology, and we had one of our fellows go and represent us there. So we're constantly trying to create opportunities for them to kind of show their stuff and show what they're made of, because they're really the entire point of the program. So, yeah.
Great, great. So next question from Kabali Faction. What are some of the resources for non-programming entrepreneurs looking to expand in this space? I'm curious to hear you guys' response, because I get this question a lot. So,
well, for me, as it relates to Code 2040, we only want to focus on engineers. The reason why we want to focus on engineers is because those are the folks that actually contribute in sizable ways. Right? I was a part of these startups, and I, as a business guy, understand where the power lies in these organizations, and engineers kind of rule the world in that regard. And engineers can actually have meaningful impact. I mean, Laura mentioned one of our interns they were the lead iPhone app developer for the company. Business guy can really have that much impact. And I think to the extent that we're providing these high-performing students, then we get the trust of the tech companies that we're kind of offering these fellows to. And when that happens, that allows us to expand into other verticals, think business, marketing, among other things. But we want to crack the code as it relates to engineers first. So that's the Code 2040 story. To the extent that you talk about something kind of outside of Code 2040, there really aren't too many programs focused on that, although I know that there are a few that are coming in that are thinking about focusing on those types of jobs, but not Code 2040 for now.
Yeah, there are a few networks out there that, both kind of specific to the diversity space, Black Founders, Latino Startup Alliance, and then there's, other kind of broader networks. I think, the main thing I would say is, keep your eyes and ears open and participate in these conversations. And, anybody can dabble in coding at this point with kind of the free resources that are online. And so if this is a space that's of interest to you, the more conversant you are and the more kind of in the different pieces of the puzzle that contribute to what it means to be a successful startup, the better off you'll be.
Yeah, and like I said, I get this question a lot. And the analogy I always give people is that if you were going to open a hair salon, you'd learn how to do hair. Laura would be my only client. She'd come in, I'd make her look terrible, and she'd tell her friends, and I'd have to shut down shop. But for some reason, people shy away from that. Just because you learn how to code doesn't necessarily mean you have to be an engineer. I actually remember Tristan about a year ago publicly learning Python, posting it on Twitter. It helps you understand the environment in which you're in any role. So, and to Laura's point, with all the resources, whether it's Code Academy, whether it's Team Treehouse, you can learn the basics of coding in a fairly short period of time, and that'll let you help understand what path you want to take, even if it's not technology. So I agree. In this environment, you at least want to understand how to code. Two more questions, because I'm not going to keep these guys all night. M. Cole, you had another question you posted on Twitter, but you're here, so I'm going to let you ask it.
All right, I'm going to get the volume back going. Can you guys hear me?
We can.
Okay. Now, look, you challenged me. I'm going down my Twitter timeline to make sure I stay on point with my question here. Oh, okay. Here we go. All right. Well, my question essentially was, if you want to get involved as a mentor or a speaker, do you have to be a company or a success story from Silicon Valley?
Yeah, so our current mentors and speakers are in Silicon Valley, working kind of in startups, entrepreneurship, technology at kind of various points along their career path, but they are succeeding. And a big part of that is them being able to answer questions about how they did what they did.
Right.
So they're, we constantly are looking for ways to involve supporters of all kinds. So if you would like to be involved, I encourage you to reach out. But specifically, the speakers and mentors are kind of from this group of success stories and those on their way in Silicon Valley.
Okay.
Great. So last question, and I'm gonna combine two that are similar, so I keep my word at it being the last question. So the question is from the Nomad. Will you guys develop self-help materials to guide tech entrepreneurs who may not participate in your program? It's a two-part question. I'll ask the second part. So any thoughts on any kind of online resources for people who may not be directly involved in your program that can get value from your curriculum?
I mean, I think this is kind of similar answer to what I said before, which is this is one of the directions that we could go in. And what we need to figure out is kind of the best use of our resources. And when I say best, I think about two things, efficacy and efficiency. And those are what we're constantly striving towards. And so, we'll figure out whether that fits in those buckets and make a decision that way.
Great. So last question is, how do we make the world know about programs like Code 2040? If you have this audience here, we're using Google Hangout. What's the message that you guys want for these guys to spread as far and wide as possible about your program?
Tristan, do you want to? I already plugged Twitter and Facebook, which I'll do again. I mean, I think I'll let Tristan have the last word, so I'll just say, I think it's you don't need me to tell you how powerful social media is, right? This is a place where anybody can kind of spread a message and spread the word, and so we read all of our tweets, we read all of our Facebook posts, and we love to engage with people through those mediums, and I think they're a great way to spread the word as well. If you are not a reporter, or you don't have a column and a publication or what have you, you can still kind of spread the word by just within your own network. And I literally can't tell you the number of times that I get connected to people that are 1 degree separated who end up being amazing resources from the program because they read a tweet or they heard their friend talk about it or what have you. It just happens literally daily, and it's been incredible, and it's allowed us to be so much more effective than we could have been otherwise. So, I would say definitely, even if you're just having a conversation with somebody or, sending one tweet or saying, hey, I just heard these guys talking for the last hour on, Divide Chat, it could turn into an amazing connection for us that ends up really helping our growth and supporting the program. So.
Yeah, kind of one thing that I was amazed by coming out to the Valley, and actually I'm still amazed by to this day, is that every so often there are events organized by other black folks in the Valley to meet other black folks. And every time I go, I always meet someone who's amazing who I hadn't known previously, right? Like, we exist. And a lot of people kind of assume we're like pink unicorns somewhere. And the thing that's most important is that in order to make any of this happen, we kind of have to help each other. And the one thing that really resonated with me about that CNN thing was Vivek's comment, right? About like a lot of times, like particularly in our community, like folks don't want to help each other, right? And like a lot of it, in my opinion, was true, right? But here, like, we're finally realizing that we exist. And folks are helping each other in that stead. So we need to continue that. As it relates to Code 2040, like, the great thing about it is that the train has left the station, and we're putting all of our resources, all of our might into making this work for the long term. One thing that we hear every week are other organizations that are doing something very close to what we're doing, or who want to start something very similar to what we're doing, or other organizations doing other things that are very similar to what other people are doing. And a lot of those resources can be saved to just help each other make their programs succeed, right? I want to do everything I can to make everybody else's organization succeed, but collectively we need to kind of get rid of some of the redundancies out there. So, like, I want to understand all the programs that exist out there. I want folks to tell me about, like, all the other programs that exist out there. I want to understand how I can continue to be helpful. But one thing that would be helpful for us is to understand, like, are there other programs like us out there that we can either kind of work with, partner with, et cetera, so we're not spinning wheels. And that's a subtle but important point, and particularly as this starts to become a really important conversation in the country, it's important that we kind of collectively are on the same page, if that makes sense. It's something that very rarely gets talked about, but I think it's incredibly important.
Great. Well, first, I just want to say thank you to you guys for taking the time. I appreciate you sharing with the audience. You know, people who are watching, I mean, this is the primary reason that I decided to start Divide Talk. You know, to show you guys that you can just start something and you can share information, and that information is powerful. And secondly, to give a visual medium. So if you have people in your lives who are saying, hey, to Tristan's point, that we don't exist, that we're not here, that every time we have these talks, you can see people who look like you, who come from similar backgrounds that you are, who are in the space, and it's real and it's relevant. So my goal is, and I hope that you guys will share these videos with as many people as possible, that someone here is going to start tonight and learn how to code, is going to grab their high school son or daughter, teach them how to code so they can be a part of Code 2040 class in the next couple of years, and we continue to work until we close this divide, right? The divide is not just about technology. It's the divide between opportunity. It's the divide between success and where we are right now. So the more we share this information, these type of dialogues, I think we're going to close it. And to Tristan's point, we're going to see a case where we're all involved in this environment. So Tristan and Laura, thank you again. I can't, say how much I appreciate you guys taking the time. It's been great. Everybody on Twitter's been loving it. So I think you're going to get 3 times as many Code 2040 applications in the next couple of weeks for the next cycle.
Send them.
Yeah, we'll take them.
Great. M. Cole, thanks for asking the question, being bold enough to sign in for people on Twitter. I appreciate it as well. We'll see you guys week after next for another edition of Divide Talk. Take care, everybody. God bless.
Bye, guys.
Bye, everybody.
Have a good night.
Yep.